This is the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com, the show that helps people convert to Islam with hosts from the US, UK, and Australia.
I'm so happy. Converting to Islam, I would say, is the best decision of my life. Before converting to Islam, I would say that, I wasn't very happy in general as a person. I was looking for answers and I was struggling to find answers. But now that I'm a Muslim, I feel much more at ease, intellectually, philosophically, and spiritually, and just in general. Makes people happy, and I thought, okay, well, that's not, very insightful. I need something, that can feed my soul. I want something to fill this gap that I have in my heart. Converting to Islam, I would say, has definitely satisfied that gap. A question that came up was the idea of what was the first cause in the universe? Everything has a cause when it has a beginning. So what caused the universe? And when I saw that question, I was quite dumbfounded. I was thinking, wow, what would have caused the universe? Because if I give the answer, the Big Bang or some other energy, I immediately told myself, okay, but what's going to cause that? And so really quickly, within only a few minutes, I came to the conclusion, it's got to be something that is outside the universe. So that's why you don't want to be spending too long. You don't want to be postponing the questions. Once you get these questions, you want to think, right, where do I look to find the answers to these questions? How do I avoid these biases that I may have? How do I make sure that I'm thinking with a clear mind? How do I make sure that I have pure intentions and that I sincerely want the truth? In many circumstances, you'll hear of people who receive the truth, but it takes them a while to accept that truth. Even though they haven't done any research, there was still a jump from not accepting this answer to accepting this answer, because all it took was time. What's your secret answer? Because this is exactly what I'm looking for. And he said that is because he started practicing Islam, and he was a born Muslim. He still is a Muslim, but he started practicing only a few years ago, and that's where the change began. Never would that ever happen. Normally, if I ever disagreed with something, it would be me proving why they were incorrect. But when it came to me learning about Islam, it was me realizing that I am the one who had misguidance in my beliefs. And so I'd shift it and think, yeah, Islam is logical in this respect. These questions answered. So that made it much easier for me, because I already had this faith of, okay, Islam managed to answer every single question that I've had. I've tried to, bombard Islam with all these questions, all these controversial ideas, and Islam has had the perfect answer every single time. And I know that if I convert, I'm going to have more questions in the future. But given the fact that Islam has managed to answer all of these questions, through faith, it is very, very likely, undoubtable even, that Islam is going to have answers for all of those questions in the future as well.
This is a place where you can get information about the topic of converting to Islam. You can also join in for our weekly live Q&A. You can get the details from our website at untoislam.com. Today we have a special guest. His name is Ryan Stanley. He converted to Islam in August 2020, and he's been a Muslim now for over a year. He's 18 years old. He was born and raised in the United Kingdom. He's currently studying law with business in Exeter University. He's passionate about calling people to Islam and maintaining good character. He's also planning on setting up an Islamic Society at his university. So welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you very much, brother. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Ryan. I'm doing good. So that's interesting there. So you've only been Muslim for a year. How does it feel so far to be a Muslim?
I'm so happy. Like converting to Islam, I would say is the best decision of my life. And before converting to Islam, I would say that I wasn't very happy in general as a person. I was looking for answers and I was struggling to find answers. But now that I'm a Muslim, I feel much more at ease, like intellectually, philosophically, and spiritually, and just in general. So everything's been going smoothly, which is all praise be to God. I'm very happy with where I am now.
That's good. And so you were saying that you were before Islam, you were not happy. What were some of the things you weren't happy about?
I'd say with just my the state that I was in when it came to trying to find answers, because when I was about maybe 15 to 16 years old, this was when I was starting to think. This is when I started having more philosophical thoughts and thinking, okay, is there a God? What makes things good? What makes things bad? What's my purpose in life? Why am I here? And when I was doing research, and I took philosophy studies when I was in school at 15 to 16, and I wasn't really getting great answers because we were studying things that weren't very impactful. We were studying things like utilitarianism, which is a philosophical theory, which is what is good is what makes people happy. And I thought, okay, well that's not very insightful. I need something that can feed my soul. I want something to fill this gap that I have in my heart. And so converting to Islam, I would say has definitely satisfied that gap. And there's there's a gap in anyone's heart who doesn't have Allah in their hearts, who don't have that remembrance of Allah. They have that gap in their soul that they need to fulfill with desires in this world. So for example, people who steer away from Islam, you typically find them doing things like partying and drinking and all these various things. So now that I'm at a place where I remember Allah, I remember God, and I think about Islam, I feel much more content with every aspect of my life. It's a blessing from Allah.
Yeah, that's good, Ryan. So you seem like you have a lot of you're very certain about the way you feel about Islam. So tell us about your religious background.
Before I converted to Islam, I was a complete atheist because I was brought up with my mum and my siblings who had no religious background at all. So I just went through my life thinking, once you die, that's it. You're dead. There's nothing more afterwards. I lived my life thinking, there's no God. And when I was younger, I wouldn't even think about it. It was only when I was 15 or 16 that I actually started questioning my beliefs. So I went 14, 15 years just wandering blindly and not really thinking about these deeper questions, these questions which are much more important and meaningful. So while my parents, they're not really religious, my extended family, so my aunts, my cousins, my uncles, my grandmother as well, they're almost, I suppose you could say, devout Christians. They're very influenced by the Christian thought, and so having a conversation with my Christian cousin, it can be quite challenging because when it comes to interfaith dialogue, there's quite a lot of toxicity. So all in all, there's no Islamic background to my family, so I'm the only person who's converted to Islam. So by the will of Allah, I'll try to spread the message of Islam to my family and help them think about these more important questions, because many people they put it off to the side. But there's a really famous example of why we should be thinking about these deeper questions, where a person's on a person wakes up suddenly and they're on a train, okay, and you shouldn't wake up on that train and just think, oh, it has food, the seats are quite nice. I don't really care why I'm here. I don't really care who brought me here. I don't really mind where I'm going. I'm content. If you woke up on the train suddenly without knowing where you were, you'd ask, why am I here? Where are we going? Who brought me here? And similarly, that's what I encourage other people to do as well. Think, why are we here in this world? Who brought us into this world ultimately? and, where we go and what happens in the next life. But, there's no Islamic background in my family, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you mentioned, to have a think about things, and you mentioned at the age of 15 or 16 when things started to happen there. So can you think back at that time, what was the first turning point for you when you felt like you were going towards religion or faith or to God?
That's a good question. So when I started thinking more about God and I started getting closer to God, I'd say it was because I was doing research online about, like, I was trying to, like, encounter different philosophical questions. I think, can I answer this question? What are my thoughts on this? And, a question that came up was the idea of, like, what was the first cause in the universe? Everything has a cause when it has a beginning. So what caused the universe? And when I saw that question, I was quite dumbfounded. I was thinking, wow, what would have caused the universe? Because if I give the answer, the Big Bang or some other energy, I immediately told myself, okay, but what's going to cause that? And so really quickly, within only a few minutes, I came to the conclusion, it's got to be something that is outside the universe, which is something which isn't physical. So it has to be a God of some sort. And that's the stage that I was at when I was about 16 years old. I concluded through, like, philosophical thinking. It wasn't like a spiritual endeavor. It was more of like an intellectual, philosophical sort of journey that I was going on. So I wasn't looking for, like, a feeling of completeness in my heart and my soul. I was just thinking, okay, what's the answers? What's the facts? So when I was thinking about this question, I came to this answer of, there must be a God that exists. That's the first stage that I reached when it came to my relationship with Allah. It was the conclusion that there is a God, but the next question that I had to think about was, okay, what are the attributes of this God? Is this God all loving? Is this God all knowing? And if there is a religion, which one is correct? And it was about a year of thinking and searching that by the blessing of Allah, I was in contact with a Muslim online who was, teaching me about Islam. And that's where I stepped from a stage of, philosophical thoughts about some random deity to go into, okay, this particular religion is the truth. And that's also a jump from, a philosophical endeavor to a more spiritual endeavor, because now I feel much more spiritually at ease than I did beforehand. Even though I used to believe in God at about 16, there wasn't any, like, spiritualness to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what was it that was pushing you towards that? So because at that age, kids, they're thinking about football or other things at the age of 16. Not many are thinking about religion. So can you try to, just try to articulate what was it that was pushing you towards that? Can you remember the feeling at the time?
I'd say when I was about 16, I was very philosophical. I'd think a lot. I used to just always think. I'd always think about, like, morality. What's good? What's bad? I'd think about behaviors. Why do we do this? Why don't we do that? Was other people my age, they would be preoccupying themselves with, instant gratification. They drink, have sex, smoke, do all of these various things. Whilst instead, what I'd be doing is I'd be wanting to contemplate on things which are much more important, much more long-lasting, because these are things which will, stick with you for your entire life, and it'll be a roadmap for your entire life, so that you know how to, function as a human being, and you know how to just live, and function. But these people my age at the time, they would just, preoccupy themselves with things which just don't matter. And so as a result, I just wouldn't hang around with those types of people. I'd keep to my own company. I was a very outgoing person. I was quite extroverted, and I'd be able to interact well with these people that I kept away from. But still, regardless, because we had different values, I wanted something that was, intellectual and important, whereas they wanted things which were, pleasurable and, short lasting. I'd keep my distance from them. And so most of my thoughts were directed to, these more important ideas. And I'd say that's why I, came to the question of, does a God exist? So I'd say it was that. It was probably my decision to keep away from the bad company.
Yeah, Ryan. So that's a real blessing that you've received from God, from Allah, to be able to think like that so early in life. So tell me about this Muslim that you were talking to online. Was this your first interaction with Muslims? And tell me how he influenced you.
Yeah, this I would say this was my first interaction with a Muslim. I was online. I was trying to meet new people so that I can, ask them these questions and create relationships with people who would be good company as opposed to bad company. So I was trying to avoid people who were, hedonistic, caring only about pleasure. And I wanted to go online and meet people who are like-minded. And I came across this Muslim who was talking about an incredible change in their lives and how they've improved their personality, their relationship with their family has improved, they feel much happier, and everything has just, improved in their lives. And he didn't say what it was straight away, so I was hooked. I was like, okay, what's your secret answer? Because this is exactly what I'm looking for. And he said that is because he started practicing Islam, and he was a born Muslim. He still is a Muslim, but he started practicing only a few years ago, and that's where the change began. So when he told me this, I was thinking, okay, I'm already thinking about God. I'm already thinking about whether a religion exists. So I was just berating him with loads and loads of questions, and we both absolutely loved it. We were calling for like 2 hours every single day. I'd ask him loads and loads of questions. What does Islam say about this? Why do you believe this? And all of the answers that Islam gave, I found very intellectually soothing, because what I found sometimes was Islam would give me an answer that I haven't thought of, and I'd think, oh, that sounds wrong. And then I'd look into the justification, the pros and the cons, and various arguments here and there, like counter and for. And I'd realize, oh, I'm the one who has the contaminated beliefs. I'm the one who needs to, rethink my paradigm, the way that I think about the world. I need to be the one that's changing my values in accordance to what Islam is saying. And never would that ever happen. Normally, if I ever disagreed with something, it would be me proving why they were incorrect. But when it came to me learning about Islam, it was me realizing that I am the one who had misguidance in my beliefs. And so I'd shift it and think, yeah, Islam is logical in this respect. And I'd say that might be one of the reasons why many people who convert to Islam, when they're asked, a common answer may be that it just makes sense. And I'd say this might be what they mean when they say it makes sense. Because when they ask questions about Islam, it just is so logical for them, and they just feel as though they deeply understand it, and they change the way that they think in accordance to the Islamic values, because they realize that they are the ones who were incorrect to begin with. And because I never experienced that before, I knew there was something different about Islam. So that's what kept me, eager to learn more.
Okay, so you mentioned that it's so logical to understand the reasons. So why do you think it is that when you tell people all the logics of Islam, they don't want to believe?
That's a very big question when it comes to trying to give people the message of Islam and try to help them, come to the truth of Islam. A massive question is, how come, if Islam is true, why do people disbelieve? And I was actually looking into this today, and I was looking more into it today, and I read a website where a scholar was saying that even intellectually gifted people won't accept the truth, because to accept the truth, there are two conditions. You need to have, a degree of intelligence, but also you need purification. So intelligence, the ability to think rationally, that's one aspect that you need in order to come to the truth. But what people disregard is the purification. And so where I found this was because the scholar on this particular website was talking about how people who are Muslims, they fall into shirk, which is association, believing that there are gods other than Allah. Why do they start getting doubts? And he was saying that it's because they commit sins. It's because they knowingly disobey Allah. And so that's where the relevant idea of, intelligence and purification is needed to come to the truth. So I'd say it's a blessing from Allah that I had the intellects and the purification needed to come to Islam. It's just a blessing from Allah. I can't take any credit for my sincere intentions, but I'd like to think of myself as being sincere and genuinely wanting the truth, because it was something that was on my mind for quite a few years. So why people don't believe in Islam, I'd say it's because of filth of the heart. It's because they lack sincerity when people reject Islam. For those who don't have a good understanding of Islam, we cannot blame them for not believing. If a person doesn't receive the true message of Islam, we can't blame them for not accepting Islam, because we need to give them the true message. And for the person who does receive this true message, and they are a person who has intellect, so they can think rationally, they're not insane, we give them the true message of Islam. Why do they reject it? It's just because they have that impurity in their heart. Now, whatever that may be, it's typically arrogance. And arguably, it always is arrogance. You care more about other things than finding the truth. So it comes down to the impurity in your heart, where you don't prioritize what you should be prioritizing. So people care more about their ego than finding the truth. And you can see this in the real world, where people reject Islam solely because they don't want to follow the rulings of Islam. They don't want to prostrate. They find that embarrassing. They don't want to pray because they don't want to, they don't want to humble themselves. So I would say it mostly comes down to the filth of the heart, where they lack the purification required to accept the truth of Islam, which is usually in the form of arrogance.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I think you explained that very well.
I appreciate it.
So let's go back now to the turning point there where you met that guy online and you were discussing with him and you were getting a lot of information from him. So you left, if we move forward from that, now can you think of the next turning point after that? You're doing some more research. What other things happened?
Well, I'd say the main turning point after that, the big turning point after that was the actual conversion to Islam. But before that, there were little turning points, which was where I would look into like the controversies that are brought up when people have a discussion on Islam and religion. So this brother of mine who brought the message of Islam to me, he would tell me to listen to Dr. Zakir Naik, who is a famous person who gives the message of Islam. And he was giving me many YouTube videos to watch, and I'd absolutely love listening to how he would respond to the many questions that people give him. So I'd say that was a good way of me clarifying some of the difficult questions that I had, because I did run into difficult questions, and it's important to think about these questions. You can't expect a person to convert to Islam without asking questions. We should answer their questions. It's not don't ask questions, believe, just have faith. We should accept these difficult questions that non-Muslims would pose for us, and that's really important. So I was looking at videos online of different scholars and different people who spread the message of Islam, how they respond to these questions, and I'd say that really helped me convert to Islam. So that's I'd say it was that. Before the major turning point of actually converting to Islam, I'd say it was understanding how to respond to these difficult questions, because I'd say these are obstacles that are stopping me from converting.
Okay. And so why did it take so long to convert? After you went through all of this process of researching and so forth, why did it take the time that it did take?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I received the message of Islam, I would say it may have actually been maybe 2 to 3 months prior to me converting. Some people, it's within only a matter of hours or days. Other people, it takes them years to finally convert. So I'd say I had quite a bit of a medium there, just a couple of months to really ponder and think about it, and to conclude that Islam is the true religion. And the question of was I too quick to convert, or did I not spend long enough? I feel as though I spent I'd say it was a perfect amount of time to think about this question of whether or not Islam is true, because you don't want to be too quick to convert. because if you're really quick to enter a religion, with that same mindset, you'll also be very quick to exit the religion when you run into obstacles. And on the other hand, if you spend too long trying to find answers, and by that I mean you have these difficulties of trying to accept Islam, these obstacles that are in your way, whatever questions they may be, and you put them off, okay? If you put these questions off, then that is a form of, I would say that's a form of denial, which is where you procrastinate and you think, okay, I'll deny the message of Islam now, and I'll consider it later on when I think about these questions. If you do that, then by Allah, it is possible that He will decide, you are going to die before you get to these questions. So that's why you don't want to be spending too long. You don't want to be postponing the questions. Once you get these questions, you want to think, right, where do I look to find the answers to these questions? How do I avoid these biases that I may have? How do I make sure that I'm thinking with a clear mind? How do I make sure that I have pure intentions and that I sincerely want the truth? If you do that, then only by the will of Allah, you'll be guided to the straight path. Because if you're sincere, then Allah will guide you. But if you're insincere, so you put these questions off because they cause you stress, you don't want to think about these sorts of things, that's where you are opening the door to misguidance. And it's important to try to avoid that risk if you can. So when you have a question about Islam, try your best to make sure that you're getting an answer to this question, and make sure that you're thorough and that you fully understand what's the arguments against Islam and what are the arguments defending Islam against these arguments, and what are the other arguments that try to prove Islam. But don't put these questions off, because you never know if you'd ever get around to having them answered. And we want to avoid that as much as possible, because you never know. If you delay questions, Allah may decide that in 2 weeks' time, He'll enter into your heart filth, where you think, you know what, I don't want to answer these questions anymore. And then you become astray, which is something that we want to avoid as much as possible. So make sure that you do have that sincerity and that you genuinely want to answer these questions, so that you don't spend too long of a time trying to gain answers. So don't spend too short of a time where you hop in and hop out of the religion, and don't spend too long so that you never enter the religion in the first place. So I'd say I had a good middle.
Okay. And in that time where you were thinking about Islam and weighing things up, did you start to practice any Islamic rituals?
Before I converted to Islam, I did take the Shahada to myself, because I think I said it in English, because this brother told me that if you die as a person who has the Shahada as the last words that you say, then you go in the declaration of faith. If you die as a person who has this declaration of faith, which is there's no God but Allah and Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, if those are your final words, then you enter paradise. So when I was outside late at night, I thought, I could get attacked at any moment. So I may as well make sure that if I die, I die, go into heaven. So I said in English, there's no God but Allah, and that Prophet Muhammad is a messenger of Allah. And that's before I converted to Islam. So even before I had the conversion, I had the belief in Islam. Although I didn't have really, really strong faith, because I still had major questions to have answered, I still had that belief, that faith. So, yeah, I'd say that's what happened, yeah.
Okay. So for me, that's when you became Muslim. Other people will believe that you have to do other things, but I believe it's in the heart, the conviction in the heart. So moving up to that point where you said it to yourself in the heart, can you remember what was the thing that actually sealed it for you to make you feel that way?
To be honest with you, brother, I'd say there wasn't anything actually, any single event that caused me to enter this state of having this belief of Islam. I'd say it was quite gradual. I had a question answered, so I thought, okay, Islam is more likely to be true. I'd have another question answered. I think, oh, okay, Islam is more likely to be true. I'd be given this argument as to why Islam is true. I'm like, okay, yeah, Islam is more likely to be true. And it was like a grayscale. So eventually I had so many questions answered that I was more on the side of believing in Islam than I was on the side of disbelieving in Islam. So it's like the question of, how many pieces of rice do you need for it to be a heap? There's not like a single point which you have a heap of rice. Likewise, there's not a single point where you have belief in Islam. If you don't have like a single event. For me, it was a gradual process like that. So I can't think of anything in particular that led me to have that faith in my heart. I'd say it was gradual by having all these questions answered.
Sure. And can you remember the time when you just felt in your heart, you felt like you said to yourself, yes, I'm now a Muslim. I'm really a Muslim now. Was it the day you converted, or was there a time where you actually felt this?
Okay. This deep feeling of, yes, I'm now a Muslim. I am now a person who submits themselves to Allah. I would say that deep feeling may have actually been after I converted, because that feeling is more of a spiritual feeling, like a feeling of personal closeness with Allah. But when I converted to Islam, I wasn't seeking that. I was seeking only for answers. So when I converted to Islam, I wasn't doing it on the basis of trying to fill a gap in my heart. That's something that I realized would happen only like months later when I realized the virtues of Islam. But coming into Islam, I had no idea about those benefits. So I came into Islam thinking, okay, I'm just going to, become a Muslim because this is the logical thing to do. I'm not doing it for any spiritual benefit. I'm not doing it to have any feeling of closeness with Allah. I'm just doing it just to be like, yep, that's another thing ticked off the box that I now have knowledge of. I now know that Islam is true. But by the will of Allah, I'd say this spiritual aspect, which is possibly just as important as the intellectual aspect, this entered my heart, I'd say, weeks, maybe a few weeks after I converted to Islam, where I actually felt as though I had that like personal relationship with Allah, as opposed to it being an intellectual relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so did you try the Islamic prayer before you converted?
Oh no, I was very much worried about trying to make sure that I did have the prayer correct. So I said to this brother who was preaching Islam to me, I said, I don't want to convert to Islam until I know how to pray, because I don't want to convert to Islam, take this declaration of faith to make it official, only for me to skip one of the prayers because I haven't learned it yet. So I asked him to teach me how to pray before I convert, so that I can have a good start. Because something that was very important to me when converting to Islam was I wanted to make sure I had a good start. I didn't want to start Islam feeling like I didn't want to start my journey of being a Muslim feeling as though I'm a sinner who can't even do their 5 daily prayers, because I knew as a fact that would demotivate me. And even nowadays, I still have that same mindset. I want to have a good start. Otherwise, I feel as though that would demotivate me and make me not want to continue doing well. And there's psychological studies to support this, where the first hour that you spend in a day is actually the most important, because how you spend that first hour of a day sets out how you're going to spend the rest of the day. So how you spend the beginning of a journey almost defines how you're going to spend the rest of the journey. So I didn't want to convert to Islam. I didn't want to convert to Islam until I knew that I was going to get off on the right footing, until I learned how to pray. So once I did learn how to pray, that's when the brother said, do you want to take your shahada, take your declaration of faith? So I said, yeah, go for it. Why not? And because this was during lockdown, it was over like a FaceTime on Facebook, which is quite something with his family.
So what was it like learning to pray?
I would say I was more worried than like soothed. I wouldn't say it was like a soothing experience for me personally, because I was just so worried about, what if I'm not doing it right and it's not going to be accepted? So I'd say it took a few prayers, or maybe like a few days for me to think, okay, I'm now praying definitely correctly. I definitely know what I'm doing. I found out later that actually I didn't know what I was doing, and it took me some time to correct my mistakes, like a few weeks or a few months afterwards. But within a few days of being a Muslim, I felt as though, okay, I now know how to pray. I've memorized these Arabic phrases, so I don't have to feel as though it's invalid. So once I felt as though my prayers were valid, and only by the will of Allah and by the mercy of Allah, they would have always been valid, even if I did it incorrectly, because Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, did say, indeed, actions are judged by intentions. So because I intended to pray correctly, only by the will of Allah and by the mercy of Allah, they will still be accepted. But it was only when I felt as though I did it correctly, that's when I started to feel that closeness and that like happiness of praying, because I felt as though that I was establishing a relationship with God. And that really helped me spiritually, which is something that I didn't know that I needed, because my endeavor when it came to religion was only, what are the answers? I wasn't thinking, how can I be on the straight path, on the spiritual aspect? So I'd say it was a few days after converting that I started getting this. I started like really enjoying the prayer, because I was no longer worried about doing it correctly. I could actually, relax and enjoy the prayer and think about Allah and think about His attributes and think about the benefits of prayer and think about what is good in Islam, what's bad in Islam, and asking Allah to guide me and to make me a better person and to improve how I spend this life and things like that. So it took a few days.
And can you describe the Islamic prayer and how it has affected your life and changed you and how you feel during it?
Yeah. So when I pray, because the prayer it has the same foundations, the same pillars as are known for all Muslims. There's a set of pillars that we have to follow, because if we want to worship Allah, He decrees for us how we should worship Him to the best extent. So He tells us how to pray, because there's nothing in Islam that we're ordered to do except that it brings us closer to heaven. And that's exactly what Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, has told us. There's nothing that is obliged upon you except that it brings you closer to heaven. So we are given these pillars of prayer that we have to follow. And I would think of it as me trying to understand the Arabic words and trying to contemplate over the meaning of these verses of the Quran that we would recite. Because when we start a prayer, we start with the very first chapter of the Quran, which is only 7 short verses. And I would contemplate on its meaning. And I'd say that was, since doing that, that has really increased my faith in Islam. The Islamic term is Iman. Faith is a wish-washy sort of translation, but it improved my dedication to Islam, because I better understood the importance of prayer, and I better understood the spiritual aspect of prayer and Islam, because I started actually contemplating the meaning of the Quran, which is spiritual. It's not just intellectual facts laid out for us, because the Quran is a guidance for mankind. It's not like a script of step-by-step instructions of how to live your life. It's guidance. So it's intellectual and spiritual. So I'd say in prayer, something that's changed me and helped me, I'd say it was the recitation of the Quran. And that's still something that I work on even today, because I've only been a Muslim for a year. I haven't memorized a lot of it, so I get to contemplate over new verses and think, okay, what does this mean? How can I apply this into my life? How does this change the way that I think about the next life? So I'd say that's probably one of the most profound impacts that prayer has had on me.
Okay, Ryan, thanks for that. And so I want to talk about your day of conversion, but before we go to that, I've got some more questions. What were some of the other influences that brought you to Islam before you converted? Can you think of any more?
Other influences. My experience with Muslims, it was mostly based on the media, of the idea of terrorism. So speaking to this Muslim brother who was teaching me about Islam, I never felt connected to anyone more than I did him. So I would say that was a massive, massive influence. And hence why I said, why it's mentioned in my introduction that, I want to, something that I'm passionate about, not only is, teaching people about Islam, but also maintaining good character, teaching people how to maintain good character. Because if this brother of mine who was teaching me about Islam, if he had bad character and he told me, no, Ryan, you're going to hell unless you convert to this religion, you're going to be punished, you're this and that and this, you're doing this wrong, I wouldn't convert to Islam. And even from a psychological perspective, you are much, much, much less likely to accept the truth if it's from someone that you dislike, even if you know it's the truth. And there's where the arrogance sets in, because you know the truth, but you reject it because you don't like the person who's told you the truth. And that's one of the impurities that stops someone from converting to Islam, even if they know it's the truth. So it's important to have really good character. And the person who brought me to helped me come to Islam, I'd say he had really good character. And we had a very good relationship. And so we'd call every day. And I just loved speaking to him because there was a fantastic balance between humor and, talking about all these random, funny, silly things, but also seriousness. We talk about, the importance of Islam, why it's important to focus on your goals in life, your values in life. So I would say one of the biggest influences outside the obvious, evidences of Islam, the biggest influence possibly that I can think of right now is the character of the Muslim who brought me to Islam. And Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, tells us to have good manners. And having good manners is something that's essential when it comes to preaching the message of Islam, because the Islamic term da'wah means calling, and you don't call only by your words, you also call by your behaviors. You call people to Islam through your behaviors, how you respond to the non-Muslims who have questions, how you respond to people who attack Islam as well. Because you do, far too often, and this is something that I'm really ashamed about, is seeing so many brothers who treat so harshly the non-Muslims who attack Islam, because by doing that, they're actually calling away from Islam. So with their words, they're calling to Islam by saying, no, you people attacking Islam, you should believe in Islam. But by their behavior, they're actually calling us away from they're actually calling them away from the religion, because they're insulting others. They're saying, no, you're wrong. I don't care what your religion says. And although most Muslims don't behave in this sort of way, seeing it in some comments in some posts that I see, it still disheartens me. And it's something that made me think, right, I really want to help people maintain good character when it comes to speaking to Muslims and non-Muslims, all of their own different personalities, because you have to change how you treat others based on their personality. If a person attacks Islam, you have to treat them with even more respect and even more politeness than if they are being kind to you. And this is actually how Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, acted. Those who attacked Islam and those who were rude to him, that actually inspired him to be even more generous and even more kind and even more loving. But unfortunately, there are many brothers who don't implement that, and it's something that I really want to encourage other brothers to try to take on in their lives. So all in all, I'd say that it was the character of the brother who brought me to Islam that influenced me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there about good characters and good manners. And this is it must be the most important part of being a Muslim, isn't it?
Yeah.
So tell me about the brother that you met online. How did you meet him?
So I met him online. I met him online through just using different social media apps. I was trying to find people who could help me answer my questions that I was having, as I mentioned before. And so I met him on social media, and we got speaking, and I really loved his personality. We had very similar energies. We'd both be very enthusiastic when we were messaging each other, and we had a very similar sense of humor. So I absolutely loved the brother. I loved speaking to him. And then he told me about Islam. And if it were the other way around, if he told me about Islam straight away, and then he started displaying a good character, I feel as though that would make it more tough for me to accept Islam. So the fact that we already had this good relationship before he brought to me the message of Islam, I'd say that was a significant factor in me converting to Islam. And that's something that many people should aim for when it comes to calling others to Islam. Make sure that you have a good relationship with them beforehand. And this brother's character, I found him very, very funny. He was very intelligent, and it was just great to speak to him. I speak to him nowadays. He has messaged me during this podcast, so I'll just swipe that away. So yeah, we are in frequent contact, and we do call we call less because we're busy, but I do enjoy speaking to him. He's a very good brother. He does try to help me quite a lot. Most people, when I'm in a friendship, they won't have like a word with you. If you're making mistakes or you've gone astray, they won't say anything. They'll say, no, you're okay, you're doing all right. But this brother of mine who brought me to Islam, he said, no, this is something that would be good for you to change. So I said, yeah, this is something that I want to change. What should I do? And he said, okay, this is what to do. And I love that about our relationship, because that's such a rarity. You rarely ever find a person who would try to help you improve your character. Most people, they just let you stay the way you are, and they don't try to help you improve yourself. So I'd say that's a fantastic characteristic about him that I appreciate a lot, and it helped me greatly not only come to Islam, but also to improve my dedication to Islam. Because even nowadays, we're talking about how I can get into a good Islamic routine, where I have a set routine of doing these specific Islamic acts each day so that I can be a better Muslim. So even nowadays, even now that I converted to Islam, we're still talking about what I can do to improve, what he can do to improve. And by Allah, I love that sort of characteristic about him, which is rare in most people, unfortunately. So that's another thing that I want to try to inspire in other people, which is, encouraging others to do good. And it says this, this is an essential characteristic of Islam, not only being good yourself, but trying to encourage others to do good. So that, yeah, I'd say that was like a key characteristic about him that helped me improve myself as a person, and to, improve my ability to understand why Islam is true.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So our listeners out there, they're thinking about converting to Islam. That's why they're listening to this. So can you give them some practical tips on how to go about finding someone like this who can help them?
To be honest, if you're searching online for people, you're going to find more people who are going to put you astray than who are going to give you good, genuine guidance. And that's really unfortunate. And that's something that I really want to, work on, because I want us to be in a world where if you speak to any Muslim online, they would give you the guidance that you need. But most brothers that you speak to, it's possible that they'll give you answers which you're not exactly looking for. And the reason for this is because many Muslims, because they haven't converted to Islam, most Muslims that you'll speak to on the internet would be born Muslims. Many of their answers would be based on culture and just convention. Like if you ask them a question that they haven't thought of before, they haven't researched it, because they haven't come to Islam through a conscious decision. So they don't have these answers already, stored inside their mind. So they're going to give you answers which don't actually align with what you're looking for. This is the case with most people who are born Muslims, but, praise be to Allah, it's a blessing from Allah that, I came across this brother who, he was a born Muslim, but through conscious effort, he decided to, return to practicing Islam. But trying to find good brothers for non-Muslims is going to be difficult. And I'd say when you're searching out for good brothers to speak to, think about their character, okay? Do they have good character? Are they welcoming you into Islam? And more importantly, how do they respond to your questions about Islam? Because what I hear quite a lot by non-Muslims is that when you speak to a Muslim, they're really welcoming and friendly when you're saying that you want to, when you're thinking about accepting Islam. But the moment that you start asking questions that are difficult for them, or the moment that you push away and you're feeling uncomfortable with, something about Islam that you're not familiar with because it contradicts your culture, that's a common criticism that non-Muslims give, is that these Muslims who are talking to you, they switch and they start, behaving differently. So it's important to find brothers when you're trying to learn about Islam, to find brothers who are consistent. They're able to respond to you well, no matter how you speak to them. If you're talking about questions about Islam which are difficult for them to answer, how do they respond? Do they try to avoid the question, or do they say, I've got an answer for you, here's the answer. Oh, you don't like that answer? Well, here's a different interpretation. Oh, you don't know which interpretation to follow? Okay, here's a bunch of facts. Have a look at these facts. What do you think is the most logical? Allah has given you rationality, so take these facts and think what makes the most sense. And I'd say it comes down to character as a way of judging who to speak to. And as I said before, arrogance is what keeps someone away from converting to Islam. Likewise, arrogance is what deters people from Islam. Is the Muslim that you're speaking to arrogant? When you're speaking to a Muslim, are they saying, yeah, no, don't listen to these other guys. They say they're Muslims, but they're actually non-Muslims. That's arrogance. So make sure that when you're speaking to a Muslim that they have good character, because that way they'll be more likely to actually have something of that is useful to say to give you guidance.
And can you suggest any social media platforms or Islamic organizations to help you to find these sort of people?
To be honest, brother, I'm still searching. Like, I haven't got a clue. There's not like a social media app or social media platform where you're going to find like a group of gems. They're scattered everywhere. So if you go into like any social media app, even let's say something like TikTok, you'll probably find some like brothers who are absolute gems. But there's not like one area where they're all gathered for you to enter and be like, oh, okay, I've got all these brothers to help me out. I think it's just a matter of trial and error. Speak to one Muslim, what's their character like? They don't have good character. Okay, speak to another Muslim. They do have good character. Okay, do they have satisfactory answers? Okay, carry on speaking to them. It's something that it's a gradual process.
Did you try any mosques?
I did, although I think, as far as I remember, that was after I converted to Islam that I went to the mosque. I think when I converted to Islam, I hadn't spoken to a Muslim actually in person. I didn't really get like a wide range of Muslims to speak to. So when I converted to Islam and during my first steps of Islam, I was only surrounded by people who had good character that were online, because I'd speak to this brother who brought me to Islam. I'd speak to a couple of his friends, and they were all also of exceptional character and conduct. So, there's not like a single place to look at when you're trying to find good Muslims to give you genuine guidance. And I only looked at a mosque after I converted to Islam, so that I could speak to more educated Muslims, those who have like a degree in theology or something of the sort, so that I can ask more difficult questions that the brother brought into Islam that are like beyond his range.